Hey guys, so for this video I kind of wanted to focus a little bit more on portrait photography. I just decided to basically do this channel based on different types of photography, and I think portrait photography is definitely one of the most important photography styles out there. So basically for this video I'm just going to talk briefly about like what makes a good portrait, either my personal opinion or like what I've researched over the internet, as well as like looking at different examples of people's photography. Studio versus street, I definitely think there's a huge difference between portraits done in the studio versus portraits done in the streets, both from my personal opinion and from seeing other people's work. Another big issue is issue of access. I think it's definitely important to know how to approach your subjects, whether you're out on the street deciding to approach a random person and ask if you could take their portrait, or if you need to do it for a job or anything like that. So but I think definitely if you're just randomly asking someone to take their photo, I think it definitely you definitely need to learn how to approach them. And of course, just a list of photographers that you should probably study. I always learn from studying other people's work, and I still have lots to learn. So basically I could spend like a good half hour or so in the morning going through my Instagram feed and then finding other photographers and then going through their timeline and see like, oh, how's their work, you know. Like I focus a lot on like the different positions that they put their subjects in, the different styles that they do it. So yeah, this is just a short video just to give you just kind of an idea of what portrait photography is. I'll start off with my own personal opinion. I think what makes a good portrait is something that's very striking and definitely provokes some kind of thought in you. One of the first images that pops in my head is of the Afghan Girl by Steve McCurry, which is one of the most popular photographs out there. It was on National Geographic a couple decades ago, and a lot of people, once they see it, like at first you hear it, Afghan Girl, I don't think I've seen that photo, but once you see it you recognize that, oh yeah, I do recognize that girl. And it became a very important photo because of not only her situation, but the way that Steve McCurry captured her, basically her situation, the way that she was giving that like very powerful expression, even though there seems to be not a lot going on, but even through that expression you can see the struggles that she's been, and definitely the color of her eyes definitely stood out from that photo. So definitely something that strikes your emotion. Another one is I really like a lot of Richard Avedon's work. He was a very famous photographer as well, and he did everything from like Liz Taylor to Marilyn Monroe to different writers, dancers, and regular people as well. There's this photo series, I believe it's called, if I'm not mistaken, it's called In the American West, and basically there's this photo of this young man. I want to say he looks maybe like 13 years old, and he's holding what looks like a snake with its entrails out, and I thought that was a very just surreal but very awesome, very raw photo, because that's probably how his life really is. But Richard Avedon was able to capture it in a studio. So that's definitely another person who I definitely look up to with his work. Same as Annie Leibovitz, she's been able to definitely capture a lot of people's expression through her work. Well, she first started out in Rolling Stone magazine. I believe she was 19 years old, which she was really young, and she started off really early, which I thought was really cool. And there's this one portion of her career where she went on tour with the Rolling Stones in 1970, in the 1970s, and it was a world tour, and basically she was just there documenting not only their live shows but also behind the scenes, and just photos of, there's one photo of Mick Jagger in the elevator and he seems to be wearing a bathrobe, and I believe it's one of her favorite photos as well, and it's definitely one of my favorite photos, just because, you know, you see Mick Jagger and he's always like strutting his thing, like, you know, got the moves like Jagger on stage, and he's like, and he was this like sex symbol in the 60s and 70s, and then you just see him here in this an ordinary elevator wearing a bathrobe. So I just thought that was a very cool photo. But there's also, when I was researching about portrait photography, I found this article that talks about kind of pretty much the gaze and how that affects how people like or dislike a photo. So definitely the gaze direction has something to do with what makes a good photo, but again, it depends on who the audience is. For example, this article was talking about how Eastern and Western civilizations basically practice different portraits based on what they like to see. So for example, Western civilizations, they like to see more close-up photos, basically from shoulders length up or even like closer. Eastern civilizations like to see more of kind of like interaction within their portrait. I believe they like to see more of the environment that the subject is in. So that definitely has a lot to do with how they perceive their photos and how they judge and criticize their photos. But I think all in all, what makes a good portrait is not only obviously the exposure, the composition and all that, but definitely if it evokes some kind of emotion in the viewer. I think if you do that, then you're very successful in your work. I've been working at a photo studio for about a year or so, and so basically it's more of a family portrait studio where, you know, families come in to take their annual family portrait, but I did work a lot with babies, especially newborns and toddlers and stuff like that. So I did get exposure to some of the studio work. We also do get people who come in for like engagement photos, couples photos, anniversary photos. So that's kind of like, yeah, you take the basic like photos of them, but you also have to be creative. I definitely had a lot. I went in not knowing anything about portrait photography or studio photography or anything like that, how anything worked, how you're supposed to pose people. I kind of basically have always depended on the people acting away and me capturing that. So then when I went into this job, it was my job to pose these people into very flattering positions and stuff like that. So definitely gave me a lot of insight of what it's like to be a portrait photographer, although I wouldn't really consider myself one. But basically I learned that I still like the candid moments a lot more. And it's just because I feel like there's more emotion to it. For example, if it was a little baby that, you know, I just positioned them there and I basically had, you know, made a noise to get their attention, like, and I get a smile or anything like that, yes, that's great. But sometimes they do really interesting things, like they make funny faces, they make goofy faces, and those are the moments that I think, and not even me, but the parents themselves, they sometimes have a great reaction to it. They sometimes say, oh my god, that was great, I really hope you captured it, and they really like those kind of photos more than the posed photos. So I like those a little bit more. But it definitely has it's pretty different from just being out on the street and asking someone for their photo, to take their photo. For example, I was at South by Southwest, the music festival in Texas in March, I believe. And over there you see a lot of very interesting people who dress in very interesting ways. And so I went out to these two women that they had very beautiful afros, and I just liked the way that they looked. And I went up to them and I asked them, hey, can you know, I'm just like shooting for myself and for personal privacy. I was wondering if I could take your photo. And they said, oh yes, of course. I think they were really willing to for me to take their photo. But at the end, I gave them my business card so that they would be able to see their photo afterwards. And I think it's just having confidence and not acting like you don't know what you're doing, even though you might not know what you're doing. And it's very intimidating, definitely, to go up to a complete stranger and ask if you can take their photos, because you just don't know how they'll react. The worst that can happen is that they say no, and then that's fine. You could find somebody else. So I've definitely learned that, but for the most part, I've learned that people do like to get their photo taken. And for the most part, they always ask me, oh, should I look at the camera? What should I do? Blah, blah, blah. And I always just like, I talk to them, I tell them to, yeah, look at the camera, whatever. But at the same time, I talk to them a little bit, and through talking to them, I sneak in a couple snapshots because I kind of want to get that, get their personality in the photo. And I feel like that's what Richard Avedon definitely did when he used to do his portrait photography. I feel like people, not only would he tell people to pose a certain way, but he would also get a little quick snapshot of them while they were like mid-sentence or anything like that. And those kind of expressions, I feel like, are definitely more provoking than just having them look straight at the camera. Although sometimes having them look straight, like the Afghan girl with her striking eyes, that definitely works as well. So basically, I think it would have to do just experiment with what you think you can do best. It's just all a matter of what your style is and what you're more comfortable with doing. So like I mentioned before, access is definitely a big issue when it comes to portrait photography and getting subjects and such. It's easy to go up to a family member or a friend or anything like that and ask, hey, can I take your picture for a project, or if I could just take your picture for personal use or anything like that. It's very easy to do that, but when it comes to going out of your comfort zone and entering a new scene, a new area, and going up to people, it's definitely intimidating, and that's something that I've been really trying to work hard at. There are still times when I'll be out in a city and I want to go up to someone and ask them to take their photo, but I just get really scared about what they say, even though I tell myself that the worst that can happen is that they say no. And for some reason, I've definitely missed opportunities because I didn't want to go up to them and ask them to take their photo, and I do regret those moments because, you know, they could have been possibly striking images. So basically, it's definitely hard to get out of that comfort zone and go up to someone and ask them to take their photo, but it's definitely worthwhile once you do, because you never know what might happen. That photo might become a very important part in your career or in your portfolio, or you might get to know that person a little bit better. You might get to know other things through that person, and maybe find out some more things about your and yourself. So it's definitely something to keep working at if you're still having trouble with it, and just keep in mind that the worst thing that they can say is no, and you just move on. That's basically all you can do, is just move on and go on to the next subject. So some photographers to look out for, obviously there's some really big ones like Steve McCurry, Annie Leibovitz, Richard Avedon, like I mentioned before. Lloyd Bishop also works with a lot of different celebrities, and has very great work as well. Jimmy Nelson has this project going on that's called Before They Pass Away, and it's basically focusing on indigenous tribes and people, and kind of focusing on their culture and all that before. And I think the title is pretty self-explanatory, Before They Pass Away, so kind of documenting before, hopefully not, but before they, that kind of culture goes away because of modern culture. Definitely looking into Instagram has helped me find a lot of different styles of portrait photography and photographers. Some of them that I found was Asher Moss. He works primarily with a film camera, and he has this sort of vintage look to it, kind of like late 1960s, 1970s look to a lot of his photographs, and they're very beautiful, very awesome. He does have a book out right now, and I'll link everybody's like webpage and Instagram page on the description box, so you'll be able to look into it. But definitely different beautiful photographs, and I've taken many screenshots of his photos to kind of just to take inspiration and put them in my own mood board. Josh Wool is also a photographer that I found on Instagram. He does a lot of wet plate photography, and he works a lot with film. And basically what that does is kind of gives his image a very like old, I don't want to say vintage, but old, like very 1800s look to his photos, like early photography photo looks, if that makes any sense. Basically, I just hope that this video kind of gave you a little bit of insight of portrait photography. There's so much to talk about. That it's very hard to condense it into a short-ish video, but these are just some of the points that I thought were important when it comes to portrait photography. But basically, by doing your research, researching other people's work, looking up how to do portrait photography, or even just like working with other photographers, definitely gives you an even greater insight of what it is to do portrait photography.
Extremity pulsating.